Welcome, everybody. You're listening to AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast. Here is your host, Kevin Ferrara.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ferrara, and folks, I apologize for not being on the air sooner. We've been a little busy here at the studio doing some remodel work to the building, and we just got tied up among some other things. So I apologize. However, we're back, and we've got a full episode. Lots of stuff to talk about, lots of stuff to catch up on. So before we get started, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsor, Fire Department Coffee, and then when we return, we're going to get right into it and start talking about some things we want you to be aware of and discuss at the coffee table, kitchen table there within your firehouses. So stay tuned. Let's hear from Fire Department Coffee.
Firefighters work long shifts. That's the nature of the job. If your station is like most, coffee is what keeps you going. That's why you should check out Fire Department Coffee. Veteran owned and run by firefighters, Fire Department Coffee offers a wide variety of delicious coffee, including their signature line of spirit-infused coffee, all roasted by hand and delivered right to your door. Even better, 10% of net proceeds from every sale goes to benefit wounded, ill, or injured firefighters and other first responders. And they've got a special deal for the Weekend Wrap-Up listeners. Enter discount code AFSO21, that's AFSO21 at checkout to get 10% off your next order at Fire Department Coffee. FireDepartmentCoffee.com, that's FireDePT
All right, folks, we are back. And if you have not tried any of Fire Department Coffee's new flavors, especially their spirit-infused coffees, please check them out. Be sure to use our discount code AFSO21. You'll get 10% off. And, Fire Department Coffee has been great. They've been putting out some other promo codes out there as well. So be sure to check out their website, follow them on social media, YouTube, Facebook, wherever they may be. And, give them a support because especially they do, a portion of their proceeds goes towards helping firefighters in need, whether they're injured or other things. Basically, firefighters need a little helping hand. Fire Department Coffee has always been there for them. They are a veteran-owned business. Lots of firefighters work there, so check them out. Give them a whatever support you can, and like I said, a portion of that goes back towards firefighters in need. So with that. A couple of things, like I said, this is going to be a full podcast, probably about an hour. What we want to do is catch you up on a particular piece of legislation, some things that are going on throughout the United States here, and a blog that I had written. I actually posted that in a local newspaper, so it's stirring up some discussion here locally. And so let's get into it. Let's switch over to another screen here. Bam! Look at that, folks. We got a new layout. Those watching us here on YouTube, for those that are following us on the audio podcast, it is what it is. You just gotta imagine we got a new layout on the screen. So. Folks that are watching here and listening, HR 2499. Now, the folks that are here on YouTube, you'll be able to see this. Like I said, the folks that are on the audio, check us out on YouTube. Give us a subscribe, hit the bell, give us a thumbs up, whatever you need to do to support our YouTube channel. And also, if you're listening on the audio channels, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any new updates. And before we get into HR 2499, I just want to remind those on YouTube or those out there listening, we are giving away AFSO 21, the weekend wrap-up podcast here, along with Eurofins and Empower DX. You heard us on a previous podcast. We are actually going to be giving away a PFAS blood test kit. Now, to be eligible for that drawing, you have to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So, whether you're already subscribed, we're looking for new subscribers. Make sure you subscribe to that channel, our YouTube channel, episode 21's Weekend Wrap Up Podcast. And then we will be selecting an individual to get one of the free PFAS blood test kits. And some people have said it's $2.99 or it's $3.99. I checked the website; it's still showing $2.99. So between a $300, $400 value, we're giving one of those away. This PFAS test kit is very thorough compared to other labs that are out there. Empower DX, Eurofins, their test kit actually does 40 plus PFAS compounds they're looking for, whereas their competitors are only doing about 6 or a dozen. So a lot of my audience members out there have paid for this kit out of pocket. They are surprised at the results that's coming back, and folks, you've heard me talk about this before. For me, there's no surprise in the fact that firefighters are exposed to PFAS, whether it was through firefighting foam, turnout gear. The fact that the compounds are showing up in the blood is not surprising. What is surprising is the amount that's showing up. And for a lot of firefighters, including myself, they are elevated levels of PFAS compounds. So it is very concerning. As you know, I'm taking that information everywhere I go, whether it be to Congress or down to North Carolina here in a few weeks to speak at the PFAS conference there. I share that information out, make people aware that, hey, there is an issue with this. Firefighters are exposed. They need to be not dealt with, but their exposure needs to be dealt with. So we're making some progress on this, and you're going to hear how that progress is working. So $24.99 HR 2499. It is the Federal Firefighters Fairness Act of 2022. Now, you've heard me talk about this specific piece of legislation for quite a while now, and it's finally passed the House of Representatives. It is sitting in the Senate, and for those unfamiliar with this, I'm just going to scroll down here and read the summary and tell you a little bit about what the actions are in this. So right off the congress.gov website for HR 2499, it's saying this bill makes it easier for federally employed firefighters who contract certain illnesses to qualify for federal workers' compensation. Now, to all my firefighters out there around the world, this is an important step for all firefighters. Now, this one is directed towards federal firefighters, DoD firefighters. If you're in the federal government, it doesn't matter if you're Department of Defense, Forestry, anything like that. If you're a federal employee, if you're a federal firefighter, $24.99 is going to apply to you. This is, again, like I said, this is a first step. We've also got the Mike Leasick Military Firefighters Protection Act. We're still working on that. That's going to protect military firefighters. There's a whole gamut of PFAS legislation out there. If you go to congress.gov, look up these bills, just type in PFAS into search, you're just going to keep scrolling and scrolling. It's a little frustrating to see how many bills are out there that are just sitting there waiting to get voted on, waiting for action. Every day that goes by, Congress is setting on these bills. More and more firefighters, their dependents, innocent civilians are being exposed to PFAS and becoming sick. So we need to reach out to our representatives, tell them, pass these damn bills, get them passed into law. So we can start getting our firefighters, their families, innocent civilians compensated and protected from toxic PFAS. So going back to $24.99 in the summary, specifically the bill provides that chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, mesothelioma, and specified other cancers of those employed in fire protection activities for at least 5 years are presumed to be proximately caused by such employment for such such of a disability or death claim under the Federal Workers' Compensation Program. So, again, you have to be a federal firefighter for 5 years in order to be eligible for this. So if you develop any of these, and I'm going to talk about the specific illnesses and cancers, if you develop any of these that are identified in this bill, and you've been a firefighter, a federal firefighter for 5 years, according to this piece of legislation, they're saying it'll be presumed that your illnesses were caused because of you being a firefighter. So let's see if we can scroll down here, look at the text. So right off the bat, Section 8143B, employees and fire protection activities of this bill. Now it says establishment of an initial list. Now this thing's going to get amended probably a lot if it passes. So expect that, there's going to be amendments to this. So this initial list of illnesses, diseases, is what Congress, they've come up with this, or the sponsors of this bill. So of course, we've got bladder cancer, brain cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, colon cancer, esophageal cancer, kidney cancer, leukemias, lung cancer, mesothelioma, multiple melanoma, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, prostate cancer, skin cancer, melanoma, a sudden cardiac event or stroke while or not later than 24 hours after engaging in activities described in Section B1C, and we'll flip down to that so you know what they're talking about. Testicular cancer and thyroid cancer. And folks, I can't tell you how many firefighters I've talked to that
veteran-owned and operated AFSO 21 Agile Fire Service Organization for the 21st century applies their extensive background in fire protection and emergency services to deliver support with identifying,
PFAS,
developing, implementing, and maintaining strategies and techniques essential to operate and sustain an emergency response organization. AFSO 21 services include staffing analysis, risk assessment, standards of cover, training, management, and financial reviews. AFSO 21 is prepared to support your organization with increasing your capabilities values. For more information, please go to AFSO21.com.
Not later than 24 hours after engaging in firefighting activities. So let's scroll down here to B1C. And so in definitions, now it says employees in fire protection activities. The term employee in fire protection activities means an employee employed as a firefighter, paramedic, emergency medical technician, rescue worker, ambulance personnel, or hazardous material worker who, and that paragraph C states, is engaged in the prevention, control, and extinguishment of fires or responses to emergency situations where life, property, or the environment is at risk, including the prevention, control, suppression, or management of wildland firefighters. So that was a big question that came out, was that, okay, they're federal firefighters. And initially everybody thought, DOD, federal firefighters, and all the wildland firefighters were like, hey, what about us? What about us? Well, there it is. It's defined. Wildland firefighters, federal wildland firefighters, are included in this bill. So if you've been a wildland firefighter for 5 years, you develop any of those previously mentioned diseases, illnesses, cancers, if this bill passes, that's the big if this bill passes, you would be eligible for some type of compensation. So I'm not going to go through the entire $24.99 bill. I want you, the audience members, to look at this for yourself. If you have questions, please reach out to your legislators, reach out to me. We'll try to get those questions answered. I will have this posted in the podcast description, whether it's audio or here on YouTube, for your review. And anything I talk about or mention on here, I'm going to try to get those links up and running on the description. So again, $24.99. It is called Federal Firefighters Fairness Act of 2022. And we look at the actions on this. And it's nice, Congress has it laid out. You can actually get in there and see the summary, the text, what's actions on this, the roll call vote, so you can see who voted for and who voted against this, because it says it did pass the House. So right now you'll be able to go in and look at every member of the House of Representatives, who voted for, who didn't. There's quite a few that did not vote for this. I'm not going to beat that dead horse, but my rep voted against it. He's got a history of doing that. There's a lot of other ones out there. So if your local rep, if your congressional rep did vote against this, call them up and ask them why. Why did they vote against this? You as a constituent have absolutely every right to know why your representative voted for or against a particular piece of legislation. So I encourage you, get on this page, look at the roll call vote, see who voted against it, and just give them a call, send them an email, and start asking questions. So the actions, as you can see, it was originally introduced in the House on 4/14 of 2021. So it took about a year because it passed the House. It says passed, agreed to in the House on 5/11 of 2022. So these pieces of legislation, nothing happens fast. It took them a year to get this thing moving. So as you can see, 288 voted yes to pass it. 131 voted against it. And I'll let you take a look at who voted against it. And like I said, just start asking questions. Say, hey, why did you vote against this? Make them accountable. Make them answer for this. So with that, we talk about the Federal Firefighters Fairness Act of 2022. So, as many of you know, I'm here in Pennsylvania. We have our, every state has its own legislation. But as you see here, there's watching on YouTube, the Pennsylvania General Assembly, Act 46. Now, this is the Workers' Compensation Act. And specifically, this one is talking about cancer in the occupation of firefighters. So what's interesting is, and you've heard me talk about this before, my congressional rep, who's on his way out, Mr. Fred Keller, while he was a state representative, they voted to enact this particular piece of legislation, workers' compensation for cancer with firefighters. He was all for that. As soon as he becomes a congressman, he's against federal firefighters having the same type of compensation. So we scroll down here, and I've highlighted the one section because it says any claim made by a member of a volunteer fire company shall be based on evidence of direct exposure to a carcinogen referred to in Section 108R as documented by reports filed pursuant to the Pennsylvania Fire Information Reporting Systems, or PINFERS, and provided that the member's claim is based on direct exposure to a carcinogen referred to in Section 108R. So what's a little frustrating, and the problem I have with that is that you have to provide evidence of direct exposure. So, Pennsylvania, about 96.8, I think it is, of the fire departments here are volunteer or all volunteer. So for us, because I belong to a local volunteer department here, for us, the volunteer firefighters, we would have to put something into PenFERS and a report that says, hey, we were responding to a structure fire. Here's a perfect example. The other night, we responded to a structure fire, mutual aid to a local department, local area. Interior, we did interior attack and provided overhaul as well. So we were exposed to carcinogens during that incident. So what we have to do now is we have to log that into PenFERS. We have to actually say who was exposed to. I've already got my exposure reports drafted up here for myself and the firefighters that were on the crew with me. So we will document all of that. And then should we ever develop cancer, we have that documented. sufficiently to show, hey, we were on this incident during this date, this time. This is who was on the crew. This is what we did, and this is what we were exposed to. So if you're not doing that, folks, whether you're in a paid or volunteer department, especially my volunteer audience members, please fill out exposure reports. Really, I recommend filling out an exposure report every time you put on a set of turnout gear, simply because we know turnout gear has PFAS on it, and just file it in your records. That for some they're gonna say, well, Kev, that's a little, intense. That's going above and beyond. Do we really need to do that? Well, if Pennsylvania is saying, hey, you need direct exposure, that the other thing too with this is that if you have dirty turnout gear, well, that's direct exposure. So, we come back, we washed our gear. We hope the carcinogens out of our gear. Nothing's 100%. There's still stuff there. We know that. But, like I said, you've got to document everything, in order to do this until these presumptives are, established to where we don't have to prove, we were exposed to carcinogens. It's presumed, hey, you were conducting firefighting operations. Okay, we presume your cancer or your illnesses, whatever, is associated with such. So, like I said, if you're not currently doing it, filling out exposure reports, documenting all of this, please do up a program. Make sure that it's done. Assign a health and safety officer to assist, or to do it, because again, I've told folks time and time again, you have to steer your medical coverage. Your doctor's not going to know, whether you were exposed to or not. For those in former military firefighters, with the VA, they want proof that it's a service-connected disability. So, you almost have to prove, hey, I was exposed to this and that, or suspected of this and that on this date, or, this year, stuff like that. So, not going to beat a dead horse with that. Do the right thing. Fill out the forms, document everything, and then, at the end of the day, try to minimize exposure, as best you can. So, moving over to another topic that's making its way around social media, from the Daily Herd Management website. Air Force pollution forces New Mexico dairy to euthanize 3,665 cows. Now, you've heard me talk about this particular dairy farmer, Mr. Art Schaap, owner of Highland Dairy in Clovis, New Mexico. Now, this particular dairy farm is right on the other side of Cannon Air Force Base, their perimeter fence. And why this particular dairy farmer has to euthanize his cows? Well, that's because we, as Air Force firefighters at Cannon, when I was there, we discharged AFFF every day during operational checks. There was aircraft hangar foam that was discharged, either intentionally or accidentally. We had a few aircraft mishaps that occurred to where copious amounts of AFFF was used. And all of that toxic AFFF, because it contained PFAS, seeped into the ground, found its way into groundwater and into aquifers, to where the dairy farmer, the city of Clovis, and others were pumping out of those contaminated aquifer systems, unknowing that they were contaminated, until somebody decided to say, hey, let's test these wells. And then they detected PFAS compounds, and it's like, and they were quite high. So, Art was tested. He had his blood tested. He's got PFAS in his blood. His cows were tested. They found lots of PFAS in there, so much to where he cannot sell his cows. He has to, basically, humanely euthanize them. Any milk you got to milk the cows every day. You can't just not milk the cows. So he is dumping, properly dumping that milk, so it doesn't go back into the environment and just recycle. So what he's, we know PFAS takes quite a long time to get out of the blood system, anywhere between 2 and 35 years. In humans, who knows how long it takes really. In cows, I'm sure there's studies out there. I don't have that before me here. But it's not overnight. It takes quite a while, and probably beyond the lifespan of these cows. So that's why he is, he's just, allowing them to live. It's costing him money. It's because he still has to feed the cows. He's not intentionally starving them. You got to be humane with them. But yeah, it's costing this farmer money. And the Air Force had come back at one time there at Cannon, provided bottled water. But then they cut that off. They've done that in a few locations. It'd be like, oh, we're sorry we contaminated your water. Here's pallets of bottled water. Most of the time it lasts about 6 months, and then they're like, well, okay, all of a sudden, boom, the drinking wells are good enough to drink out of now. They're below the EPA's lifetime health advisory of 70 parts per trillion. So, we're off the hook now. And that you've heard me talk about that whole thing, 70 parts per trillion. The EPA expects you to be able to drink that every day and not get sick. Folks, that's total bullshit. Ask the thousands of firefighters out there, innocent civilians that have done that and are now sick. Who come up with that theory that, if you drink 70 parts per trillion of PFAS in 2 liters of water, you're not going to get sick. That's insane. So, and I'm sure there's some researchers out there that'll argue, oh no, we've got the data. Well, let's see it. Prove that these individuals are not sick. I have yet to see it. So yeah, Mr. Art Schaap, he's talked to the Guardian. I've reached out to him. He's got a pending lawsuit against the DOD. He may be reluctant to speak with me. I've got the olive branch out there. I fully support him, knowing what we did, because the DOD, the Air Force, is not going to support him. They're gonna rebut everything that he's saying. I was there, boots on the ground, for 4 years, between 91 and 95. I know what we did. I know where we discharged the foam, and I'm not blaming my leadership that was there. Had a fantastic fire chief, assistant chiefs, crews that I worked with. We were misled on AFFF, about PFAS. Somebody knew about it because, again, it dates back to the early 1970s. The Air Force knew. But yeah, collectively, I think we as firefighters at Cannon at the time just simply did not know the toxicity of AFFF, and therefore we just discharged it. Didn't have, we weren't concerned about it. We were told, hey, it was soap and water, it's perfectly fine. Well, here we are years later, and unfortunately for Art, his farm has taken quite a hit. He's had to sacrifice quite a bit, and ongoing with this, and like I said, it's costing him money. And potentially it's going to cost him and his family, and obviously the cows their life. So I apologize. When I was on PBS there in New Mexico, they interviewed me, and I apologized. Because I simply didn't know. I continue to apologize. So if the day comes that I can actually meet Art in person, apologize to him in person, shake his hand and say, I'm sorry. I hope that day comes. Even if it's a phone call, a Zoom call, something like that. Just, man to man, we can have a conversation and and anything I can do to support him in his endeavor, I will do it, because, like I said, the DoD is not going to. So, so moving over to something I wrote here locally, I did a blog on our company's parent company's website, APSO 21 LLC. So, I titled it Managing PA Fire Departments. Now, you've heard me talk about in the past, Pennsylvania is very unique in the fact that there are no requirements. There's no minimum training requirements to be a firefighter in Pennsylvania. That baffles a lot of firefighters. I was out at the 4th annual Firefighter Health and Safety Conference out in exotic Beaver Creek, Ohio, last November. We sat down, pre-conference dinner, talked to some firefighters, try to get a grasp on what their requirements were. And for most of them, it was Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, EMT, or paramedic, depending on what they were. But a lot of these departments were paid or, combination departments. So I jokingly said, hey, in Pennsylvania, what do you think it is in Pennsylvania? And somebody said, driver's license. I said, you don't even need that. I said, if you're not going to be an operator, an engineer, you don't need to have a driver's license. You just need to, be standing on your own 2 feet, breathing, and have good eyesight, or, be able to see for the most part. And, to be a firefighter. And they were like, that's insane, absolutely insane. So, I talk about this a lot. So I wrote this blog, and then I pretty much copied the entire blog, sent it to a local newspaper for a letter to the editor. They published it. So going through, managing PA fire departments, like I said before, 96.8 of departments of the 1,800 registered fire departments here in Pennsylvania, 96.8 are volunteer, mostly volunteer. The remaining 3.2 is career, mostly career. At one time, Pennsylvania had 300,000 firefighters, volunteer firefighters. We're down to about 37,000. That number's declining every day. You're going to hear folks talk about, how do we recruit and retain individuals? And, that's a tough question, folks, because there is no textbook answer. This isn't a cookie cutter boilerplate type of solution. You as departments out there have to figure out what works best within your community. How do you recruit those individuals in? Same thing, in universities, colleges. How do you recruit those athletic candidates? How do you get those folks in? What works best for your programs out there? So the same thing within the fire, EMS, even law enforcement, emergency services as a whole. What's going to work best for your program, your community? Because what works for you may not work for somebody else. But you can sort of communicate back and forth, and I hope that you do communicate back and forth, figure out those best practices, tweak it a little bit. We did that a lot in the Air Force. We would go out, do inspections, determine what the best practices were. We would share that, socialize that out with other departments, MAGCOMs and even, branches, service branches. And they would take that information and tweak it, however they could to make it work, or, tear it apart a little bit, take a bit here, take a bit there, and incorporate that within their organization. And it worked. It's like I said, you really have to share information. You can't just hold everything to yourself. That's what the fire service is about. In order to progress, we have to share information amongst ourselves. Don't be selfish. Don't hold on to everything. Look at the service enterprise-wide, as a whole. How do we better the fire service, as a whole? And, the only way we can do that is to share information. So going through here, I talked about, PL 350 number 60. It's called the Second Class Township Code here in Pennsylvania. And Section 1553, Emergency Services. It states the township shall be responsible for ensuring that fire and emergency medical services are provided within the township by the means and to the extent determined by the township. And that shocked a few people in that they weren't aware of that, especially township supervisors. I've spoken to many around here and explained at the end of the day, the township supervisors are responsible for defining what emergency services is needed and how it's to be provided within their communities. Historically, what has happened here in Pennsylvania is that township supervisors simply let the local fire department run the show. Well, the problem with that is a lot of the personnel in leadership positions within volunteer departments are not properly trained. They don't have the experience. They don't have the knowledge. All of that really needs to be involved in organizing and managing a fire service organization, whether it's volunteer or paid. A lot of times, fire chiefs, line officers, they are elected or selected depending on how their organization is set up. Most of the time, the fire chief, deputy chief, sometimes the assistant chief, they'll all be elected positions. But it's a popularity contest, for the most part. Small departments, if they simply don't have the manpower, it's on a rotational basis. So, for a year, 2 years, Joe Smith may be the fire chief, and then, after their term is up, whoever was deputy chief will rotate up and move into that spot. Whoever was assistant chief, it just, you see what I'm saying? Everybody gets promoted, goes up the chain. The chief, bounces down, comes down to the bottom, and or just may not even fall back in line, in that chain of command. And it's just a rotational basis. But like I said, small departments, I've seen that because they simply don't have the staffing. Or you'll have a fire chief that's been in there for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they just, because they're so popular, they're so set in their ways, that's how it's always been done mentality. Nobody wants to rock the boat and say, hey, this 50-year chief, it's time to go. And that just it doesn't happen. So paid departments, we don't see that very often. But in the volunteer fire service, yeah, it's quite popular. Like I said, especially in the areas where not a lot of members are there, or there's, even if there are a lot of members, it's just, that's how it is within that organization, because they are considered private organizations, volunteer departments. So, like I said, I've talked to a few. I've talked to some state legislators, when we talk about training. And what really shocked me is one state representative here in Pennsylvania I spoke to. She, as we were talking, I said, we really need to look at training for firefighters, minimum training. And I'm going to show you here a report. Well, let's flip over here. So we'll go back and forth here. So Senate Resolution Committee, back in 2008, I believe it was. Let me scroll up here. 2018. My apology, I forgot the one. So SR 6. It is the Senate resolution. So they had a bunch of committee members come through, and they sat down, and it wasn't just legislators, it was emergency responders. They I think it was a 30 plus membership on this. Sat down, discussed what is needed, what is really recommended on this. So the first one they come up with, their there's multiple recommendations, so I'm picking and choosing a couple here. So recommendation 16, educate municipal officials about fire and EMS crisis and needs. So in 2018, they recommended that this occur, but here we are in 2022, and it still has not occurred in some locations. Now, there are some municipalities out there that have gone above and beyond. They've got a really great working relationship with their fire and EMS responders out there. And then there are some municipalities out there that just they're totally hands off. They're like, oh, fire chief's got it. We don't want to meddle in their business because they're the experts. We don't want to we're the municipal leaders are like we don't have the knowledge on that. We're not the experts. We're going to let the fire department handle that. Well, it goes back to what I just said earlier. If you're not properly trained, and you don't even have to be certified, because a lot of places certification is just a piece of paper. Go through the training, document it in-house, keep up on it. You're going to be probably a lot better than just doing a one and done cert. And that's what happens a lot. You get this certificate. They don't expire. It's a one and done and be like, oh, here's my cert. Here's my cert. I've got my cert. Well, your cert's dated from 30 years ago. It's how much of that information have you retained? Probably not a whole hell of a lot. So that's why the continuing ed stuff is really getting pushed now. So you retain that information, keep your skills up. EMTs, this, you got to get so many hours of CEUs to maintain your proficiency. So proficiency training. So we'll call it that. So yeah, municipal leaders are, they were totally standoffish. So, this committee, they come up and they said, hey, we really need to sit down. Our municipal leaders really need to sit down with their local responders, and the state really needs to sit down with municipal leaders. I wish they would do an entire summit to where you have state leaders, legislators, the state fire commissioner, folks from the State Fire Academy, they're all there, EMS leaders, from the state. And then they invite municipal leaders to be in attendance. And then they invite firefighters, EMS, and they invite really the general public, the constituents, the community members. So they're aware of what should be happening within their community. Because I'll tell you what, I've talked to a lot of community members as well. And they are... they don't have I don't want to say clueless because that word's a little demeaning. They're unaware let's go there. They're unaware of what should be required or should be expected of their local emergency responders. And they're also unaware of what is currently happening within these organizations because taxpayers, whether it's through donation, or through a filtration of sorts. So the taxpayers pay their property tax. A portion of that goes towards fire EMS programs through the municipality. The municipality provides some funding through a general fund to the local department. So there's a cycle there. There's a funnel. There's a filtration of how taxpayer money is used and gets to a local department. And often more than not, that taxpayer money is not properly managed. It's not properly followed. So, it's labeled as a donation. It comes from the municipality, labeled as a donation with no accountability. So what was that money used for? How, what benefit, what return of investment did the local community members receive in lieu of that donation? And often, like I said, often more than not, community members have no idea. You give a municipality, give somebody $10,000, a fire department $10,000. If it's my tax money, I want to know how that money was used. I want to see some type of return of investment, whether it be documented training, equipment, anything like that. I want to see where that money went to. And that's what you, audience members, firefighters out there, you should be doing that within your own organization. If your leadership is not doing that, ask them. Say, hey, how do we track our income and expenses? How do we socialize that to the public? And you'd be surprised how many volunteer fire departments out there, they are so white-knuckled in holding on to their financials. They absolutely refuse to socialize any portion of their financials to the public. They'll gladly hold their hand out, take that money, but they won't explain how that money is being used. And a lot of times we've seen misappropriation of funds, mismanagement of funds. Yes, downright, in some cases, criminal. So yeah, there's got to be accountability with that. So that's really what, with the recommendation, they said, hey, we all got to get on the same page so everybody knows their role, what's expected of them at the end of the day. So, and I'm going to have a link to this. So if you're not in Pennsylvania, you can still see what the state had come up with back in 2018. So that's recommendation 16. Again, educate municipal officials about fire EMS crisis and needs. And then the big one that I really push is recommendation 18, establish definitions, classifications, and training levels for fire service providers. So, I'm all about training. I've always been like that, especially, throughout my military career. I was a training officer. I managed training for Air Combat Command firefighters. That was the big thing is, getting them, properly trained, proficient, to provide an optimal level of service to the community. So here you see those on Facebook, or not Facebook, but oh my gosh, YouTube. You can see it up there. Those that are listening audio podcast, click on the link. It'll pop up this PDF. Hopefully you can follow along. But yeah, with this recommendation 18, the issue, there's no standard level of training for Commonwealth Fire Services. I've said that time and time again. It's completely shocking. I've talked to the State Fire Academy administrator. They're working on some programs down there. They're doing some fantastic work to get to where we need to be. Sort of follow along with what these recommendations were since 18. So hats off to the team down there. They're bringing in more personnel. So those here in Pennsylvania, you're going to see some new and exciting things coming out of the academy in terms of training and the curriculum and stuff like that. So I'm excited to see that. They've also reached out to me, to consult a little bit, be part of some things that are coming. So I'm excited. So here, problem statement, they state not having the proper level of training will lead to more injuries and possible line of duty deaths. That's a certain, folks. I'm just going to put it out there. The lack of initial training, proficiency training, it substantially increases risk and liability to not only the firefighter, the fire department, the municipality, but the public. And that's what I wrote in my blog, is that, and we'll go back to that here in a second, but at the end of the day, yeah, the risk, there's just way too much risk, by not being trained. You have to be trained. I mean, those that are blue collar workers, you don't walk into, even the guy flipping burgers at McDonald's, they have to be trained to do that job. The fry guy, you gotta be trained to do that job. They don't just hire somebody off the street and say, here you go, have at it. But that's what's happening here in Pennsylvania with some of these volunteer departments. It's like, here's your gear, there's the truck. When the tones drop or the siren goes off, make sure you're here and get on the truck, and then we'll go from there. No, my God, no. You gotta know what the hell you're doing out there in the fireground scene, because if, like they said, right there, it's going to lead to more injuries and possible line of duty deaths, and we don't need that. One injury or one fatality, whether it's a firefighter or an innocent civilian, is one too many, folks. We're better than this. Yes, firefighting is inherently dangerous. There will be injuries, there will be deaths, but my God, this is 2022. We've talked about this as a fire service, enterprise-wide, over and over and over again. Go back, listen to my podcast with Chief Billy Goldfeder. That was a fantastic discussion. Chief, read his books, get his books. He is just a phenomenal fire service leader, common sense guy. He tells it like it is. And for some, the truth hurts. But we got to look at ourselves. And the big thing, the big takeaway I had with discussion with Chief Goldfeder is, we talked about white helmets, those in leadership positions. And Chief is like, white helmet is just white paint. That's all. And that's all it is, folks. Everybody, it's like, oh, look at my white helmet. I'm in charge and, I'm a fire service leader. But are you? You got a nice fancy white helmet, but are you truly a leader? Are you capable of leading, others safely and getting them home at the end of the day? That's a question to ask, and a lot of these white helmets out here that I've seen are not even Firefighter 1 trained, but they're in these leadership positions. And it's like, what are we doing, folks? So Pennsylvania, some municipalities, they're really cracking down on that. They're pushing for training. Surprisingly, the fire departments that are within their communities are pushing back, saying, hey, the state doesn't have a standard. So if the state doesn't have a standard, we're not going to, accept a local municipality, which is, it's absolutely crazy. So yeah, read, recommendations 16 and 18, as you click on that link. So going back to my blog, like I said, I talked to a state rep, sat in her office. We talked about training, and without hesitation, I said, because I told her, I said, we really need to have Firefighter 1 as the basic. That's the essentials. That's going to get you, and it's about 160 hours of just basic education. That doesn't mean you knock out the 160 hours and you're good to go. No, like I said before, you got to take proficiency training and keep up on your skills. That just gets you in the door. But there's mentorship involved. There's, in-house training. There's a lot of stuff involved with making sure that new recruit, that young firefighter, or even if it's an older person that wants to be a firefighter, they take that initial training. You've got to mentor these people. You can't just say, oh, you completed essentials. Congratulations. Get on the truck. Let's go. Let's see what you got. No, you can't just... We don't throw people to the wolves, folks, in the fire service. That's just piss poor management. That's how people get injured. That's how people get killed. So, like I said, I talked to a state rep. We sat down, and immediately it was, why do we want to create another burden for volunteer firefighters who are already burdened with, trying to figure out how to stay afloat with fundraisers and everything. And that word burden really, it really burned me. It actually, it pissed me off because it's, and this individual, inexperienced with firefighting, as many legislators are, and I'm not gonna fault our legislators for that. I mean, they do their thing. Firefighters do our thing. But to immediately say, oh well, training is a burden. Really? Let's pull the stats, folks. Let's see how many firefighters were injured, killed, innocent civilians, bystanders, because of a lack of training. We trace it back to the emergency responders. Like I said, it's an untrained firefighter. I won't say in inexperience, because some places you just don't get the responses, so you don't have that experience. But you can go through the training. You can simulate. You can create scenarios. To reduce the risk. Eliminate the risk. You create these scenarios, and you go through the motions, and it builds proficiency. It's almost like muscle memory, brain memory, mental memory on how to do things. Because I forget, how many times you have to repeat something before you naturally, it becomes natural to you. That repetitive motions you go through. That's what we do as firefighters. We train. I heard that a lot in the military. Is like, my God, here we are. We're training again. That's all we ever do. We train and train. But that one incident, that one moment, all that training pays off. And that's what we do it for. That's another thing too. I hear, a lot of firefighters are like, oh, I wish we had, wish we got more calls, hope we get a structure fire today, or hope we get a vehicle accident. No, that's the wrong mentality, folks. We as a fire service, yes, we love the action work. We love the playtime, but think who's on the receiving end. Do you think they woke up that morning and be like, oh yeah, I hope my house burns down today, or I hope I get into a vehicle accident today? Nobody ever says that. So why would we as a fire service say, oh, I wish we had a fire today, or wish we had an accident, or wish we did this or that? No. The statement that should be coming out of any fire service leader is that, I hope we don't have anything today. I hope, we sit here in the station, or we train all day. I hope, I hope nobody, loses a house or is injured or killed. 'Cause really, I would rather train 1,000,000 hours and never have an incident, never respond. That is a goal we should all have, is that we train, and nothing ever happens. It's not that glorified, I'm a heroic firefighter. It's not the fame, the glory, all that stuff. That doesn't jive with me. It's, like I said, I would rather train all day, every day, every shift, whatever it is for you guys and girls out there. That's what your goal should be. But if you do have an incident, all of that training, all of those hours pay off in the end, and you're safe. Depending on the situation, you may save a life. There's going to be times out there when, the inevitable, you're not going to save everybody. But the family members, that could be watching, the family members that get notified, you can say, hey, we had a trained crew. We did everything we could as trained firefighters, to, try to save the family member, the property, the environment. But imagine those same family members, if they do suffer a loss, they're looking on, or they find out, oh, the firefighter or that fire department doesn't even train. Imagine them, and it's like, well, it's like the Keystone Cops showing up. We got to do better, folks. We got to do better as emergency service providers. We are public servants at the end of the day. But yeah, this particular rep, again, it was a burden. And, in my blog, I talk about that workers' comp. You look at workers' compensation, whether you're a paid or volunteer firefighter, and volunteer firefighters here in Pennsylvania are considered employees of the local municipality, in terms of workers' comp. They're not paid employees, but when it comes to injuries or illnesses like that, volunteer firefighters can absolutely, you heard me read it off earlier, with that act, they can file a claim for compensation, lost wages, medical compensation, anything like that. So when it comes to those individuals that are untrained, volunteer firefighters are considered high risk right off the bat, because that's how these insurance providers look at us. They look at volunteer firefighters. They probably don't train very much. They don't get very much calls. Who knows who's coming out? You've got a varying demographics of personnel out there. Age, weight, medical conditions. Look within your own departments, volunteer firefighters. Do you guys go through an annual physical? Is that reported to the department? Look around your department, and I'm not slamming anybody. I'm just saying that's the facts, is that you look around within your department. Whereas you look in a paid department, they got to go through initial physical. They got to pass, the firefighter physical agility test. They go through an annual physical exam, and if the doc finds something, they disqualify you as a firefighter. Seen that a lot in the military. Military's got their own, but then we had the firefighter requirements during our occupational health exam, and if you couldn't pass the NFPA standards in there, there was a few firefighters I watched, got left go because of that. So, untrained firefighters, they're more of a risk than others. So, in terms of workers' comp, a couple things could happen. If that untrained firefighter, is injured on the scene, and they file a claim, the provider, workers' comp provider, could approve that claim, pay that claim, or they could say, nope. They're going to do an investigation anyhow. They could say, nope, that individual's untrained. We're not paying that claim. Or they could go back and say, oh, you guys don't train. When your policy is up for renewal, we're not going to renew it. So now what do you do? What's that department do? So there's a lot of things that could happen, in terms of being untrained. And that's what I was trying to push. And in my blog at the very, very end, I say, in closing, should you ever find yourself requesting emergency or non-emergency assistance, ask yourself, regarding those responding, would you rather choose personnel proficient in providing potentially life-saving measures, or would you be satisfied with personnel who are unregulated, unmanaged, or inexperienced, who because of such are more likely to cause additional harm to you, someone else, or even themselves? Would you accept the latter from your doctor, law enforcement officers, optometrist, or your dentist, all who are regulated, managed, and proficient? So, again, you look at EMS providers here in Pennsylvania. They're regulated, they're managed. As an EMT myself, I had to go through, hours, hundreds of hours of training, pass, various, proficiency exams. I have to maintain proficiency training, continuing ed, in order to maintain my license. But, as a firefighter EMT, it's weird because as an EMT, if I go out on a medical call, I have to be, licensed, all that stuff. But if I go out on a fire call, nope, I don't have to have anything. So it's like, it's a challenge. I see both sides of the sword on this, and it's just like, but at the end of the day, I push for training. I hope audience members do the same. Because really folks, just stop bitching about training and do it. Because it's not about you. Firefighting is not a beauty contest. It's not about you as a firefighter. Yes, I push for career development, professional development. But at the end of the day, who's your stakeholders? Who's your primary stakeholder? It's your community members, your residents, visitors, business owners within your community that are counting on you as firefighters to show up, be competent, be proficient, be professional, and do everything that you possibly can to save a life, save a property, save the environment. People are watching, people are talking. You're under a microscope. Microscope. Magnifying glass now. Oh, they could be using a microscope to be that precise. But yeah, you're under a magnifying glass as to what you do, and that does affect some departments. They're like, we just don't want to deal with that. So, but if that's occurring within your department, if you see some gaps, please speak out. Don't be afraid to. If your department leadership gives you crap, go to the municipality and say, look, here's what I tried doing. Go to the state, talk to your state legislators, call me up, message me, I've been involved in municipalities, around the country here in the U.S., talking to folks, especially here in my local area. I've rocked I've rocked the boat a few times, ruffled a lot of feathers. Matter of fact, there was one local county leader, from what I had heard. Now, again, this is just coming through the grapevine, but in response to my blog, they had said, "Hey, is there any truth to what was written?" And it just baffles me. It's like, yeah, I created a letter to the editor, just pulled some words out of my ass and threw them together and said, "Hey, check this out." It's, folks, me. I'm very thorough in my research. I don't post bullshit. I post facts. If I get things wrong, it's very rare, and I'm usually called out on it right away. And then I go back and I say, "Hey, let's modify this. This is what was said or written. It was incorrect or whatever." But like I said, I think that's only happened maybe once, and it was regarding I think it was regarding the blood test stuff. I had posted the conversion rate on it from nanogram per milliliter to parts per trillion. It was jacked up, and I think that was during the Eurofins podcast. And we found out my source, the website, they screwed up on their formula. They had a calculator, so it was actually on their end. But again, folks, everything you see on the internet isn't correct. So make sure you do your homework. That's what I do. That's what I try reaching out to. Once I do my homework, I try to share that out with everybody. So my audience members can concentrate on doing their job. They're not tied up. I've got the ability to do it. Put in the time to do all this research. So I'm going to have links to what we talked about today in the podcast description. I say this every time, and I truly do mean it. I appreciate the audience members out there, whether you're subscribed or not. I know for a fact there's a lot of listeners out there, a lot of followers that just listen. They don't necessarily subscribe, but they are following the podcast. They're sharing it, the information. They're talking about things. I appreciate each and every one of you out there. The support you've given me over the years with the podcast, it has not gone unnoticed or unappreciated. So, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate each and every one of you out there. As always, if you got topics you want me to discuss on here, if you want to be a guest on the podcast, I'm more than happy to have you on here. Your department, as an individual, I love getting folks on here so we can share information, talk about those best practices, and like I said, I've got the platform to do it. So, let's make it happen this year and into next year. So, that's going to do it, folks. My mouth is going dry here. We're just a little bit over an hour. So I apologize on that, but, so with that, as always, keep supporting your local fire emergency services. Everybody, please stay safe. And until next time, folks, we're out of here.
Veteran-owned and operated AFSO 21 Agile Fire Service Organization for the 21st century applies their extensive background in fire protection and emergency services to deliver support with identifying, developing, implementing, and maintaining strategies and techniques essential to operate and sustain an emergency response organization. AFSO 21 services include staffing analysis, risk assessment, standards of cover, training, management, and financial reviews. AFSO 21 is prepared to support your organization with increasing your capabilities values. For more information, please go to AFSO21.com. That's AFSO21.com.